Hello, I am Mystic Michelle from Mystic Wisdom Healing. I am a Reiki master, herbalist, intuitive card reader, space holder, and teacher.
And I'm Julie from Heart Alchemy. I'm a therapist who also does intuitive readings, energy healing, and just generally, I love supporting people on their healing and growth journeys. So, today on this episode, I get to delve into the spiritual path, the process of Michelle becoming all these things that she listed. And it's super fun. Yeah, you're in for a treat. She's a pretty cool person, really fascinating story, and so much wisdom. Let's go! Yeah, that was welcome, Michelle.
Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, and welcome back to the conversation. I'm really curious about some things about you, and I love this opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more. Um, we met through doing Ethereal Arts Bazaar.
Yes.
Readers next to each other, doing slightly different readings, different types of readings, having different stories and all this. And I'm always so curious how people find their path to doing readings and other sorts of spiritual gifts and services like that. But yeah, what's your, maybe this is a really broad question, but what was your path to becoming a reader, a healer? However you want to answer that very broad question.
Very broad question. Yeah. So I'll take it into the direction of like what started me on my spiritual path,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like if you're a spiritual worker, like that is it's your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no going back. It's the way you live your life. Really quickly before I start that, the other day, I met someone new and we were having this conversation with somebody I already knew. And I kept saying, using words like you deserve, you have value, like you deserve to be respected. And
Mm-hmm.
this person stopped and looked at me and goes, "Who are you?" And I go, "Well, I'm me."
Mm-hmm.
This is like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? And they're just like, you kind of talk like you're a therapist or a
Mm-hmm.
counselor. And I was like, oh no, this is just who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, long roundabout way of saying that, like, when you're a spiritual person, the spiritual healer, you are on
Mm-hmm.
that path all the time, and it doesn't turn off even if you're being silly meeting people out in public.
Mm-hmm.
So to get in where I started. So we talked a little bit last time about the fact that I had received messages and
Mm-hmm.
premonitions and saw different things when I was younger, and how that was very much something that my family was not okay with. But that did not stop me from exploring. Um, so when I was about 13, um, I was at the library of all places, and because we had just gotten our first library cards and we were so stoked to be able to go check out whatever library books we wanted to, and I found this book series called Sweep,
Mm-hmm.
and it is just on a shelf down at the bottom, just whatever it was, my eyes were drawn to it. And I was very much into witches. Like, I used to dress as a witch every year for Halloween because I thought if I did that enough, my coven would find me. So I picked up this book and I started reading it, and it was actually written by Wiccans.
Hmm.
And it's about a girl who finds out that she is from a long lineage, ancestral lineage from Ireland. And she's an herbalist. She ends up working with herbs. And so it's about her experience of stepping into her power
Mm-hmm.
at like 15, 16, and it's just a really quick read but super powerful. And so I started kind of exploring like the Wiccan, pagan, and started getting into some really different practices. This was very much not okay in the religion that I grew up in. And there was a lot of turmoil within myself because this all felt so right. Not necessarily Wiccanism, like I've never really been drawn to that, but the pagan roots of it, all the witchism of it all, the celebration of the earth, that all felt so right. And then to have to be forced to go to a church that felt so wrong. And I was feeling really conflicted, plus going through, hormonal changes. That time of year, I'm in middle school. Life's just crazy. So I got into a downward spiral of self harm, and I actually do many attempts at suicide. And one of the times that I had done, or the last time that I had tried to do it, I actually passed out in health class. No adults ever asked me about what had happened, but I like passed out, don't know how long I was on the ground for, got back up, sat in my chair, life went on. And in this process and in this time period, there was because I had taken all the medicine in my cabinet. And in this period of time, my mother had asked me if one of her friends from work could move in. And I was like, what do I care? She's your friend. We have an extra bedroom, whatever. Um, and so this woman entered my life and would take me to like basketball games, and at the same time introduced me to tarot and oracle cards and angel readings, and taught me how to meditate, and like showed me how to meditate. And it's really interesting because for many years my mom and I would fight about this because she says that person never moved in.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. So
what happened?
So, in my memories of this, um, she lived with us for about 6 months and taught me how to meditate. She would have me sit in front of our little computer that was in her room, that was my computer, and would watch the old tube like screensaver that would move around and change colors. She'd have me just focus on that for a long period of time. So this person was a real person, but I had come to such a state in my life that I believe one of my guides actually manifested in to a version of somebody who I actually had met and known and thought was really cool.
Wow.
So that way I would actually listen to what was happening and have a little bit of guidance.
And maybe believe it's happening in the physical, in the 3D, right? And not be totally freaked out by
or just all in my head, and like that I'm making it up.
Something that feels really valid and
yes,
like grounding. Interesting.
And this discovery of realizing that this person actually never lived in our house actually didn't come to me until about 2 years ago. And so me and my mother have actually been fighting about this for 15 years.
You're like, she lived with us.
She lived with us. And finally I messaged my best friend and was like, do you remember so-and-so who lived it? Because like I swore I like had memories of all like me and my best friend having interactions with her in the house. And she goes, no, I have no idea who you're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah. And so like I know some people be like, wow, you're crazy. And I'm just like, nah, what? Am I? Or was I in such a state that in my spiritual like awakening and upbringing that they're, especially with trying to commit suicide and being so miserable, but and wanting to be on this path, that they've spirit will come in the way that it needs to come. And in my
Mhm.
13-year-old brain, it needed to come in the shape of form of this woman who was living her life to her fullness,
Mm.
who didn't have kids, didn't have obligation, didn't have, so those were like the qualities of things that I was looking
Yeah.
for. And she taught me about oracle cards and readings, and she taught me how to meditate, which I think was the most helpful thing ever.
So I think I have two questions here. One statement. If that is crazy,
Mm-hmm.
it's the most helpful, healthy crazy you could possibly experience, right?
Right? Yes.
Somebody coming in to guide you and help you meditate. Oh my gosh. It's
Yeah,
like
to teach you how to
incredibly
meditate.
healing.
Yeah.
It sounds like you got the guidance and support you deeply, deeply desired and needed. So amazing. Second question is, do you, hmm, maybe this is hard because the memories might not line up with what other people remember happening, but um, do you recall having any actual interactions with her that are substantiated? Like, did you guys have any sort of relationship, even though she wasn't maybe technically living at your house,
Um,
possibly?
so my mom used to always say there was her friend from work that took me to a couple basketball games.
Okay,
So I
so
do
you had that
have a couple
experience. Mm-hmm.
memories of an actual person, physical form that
Mm-hmm.
drove me around in a car. Like I have memories of
Yeah.
that. But my teacher one day when we were talking about this asked me the question, well, what did her room look like? What did
Mm.
her clothes in her room look like? And so like
Mm.
I started to try to remember what her room looked like, and it was all of our stuff and the
Mm-hmm.
closet was empty.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Interesting.
how could that be someone
Mm-hmm.
living with you when all the stuff their stuff doesn't isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
But I did have a physical person that,
Mm-hmm.
and she did actually show me tarot. It was like after one of the basketball games, she took me and showed me tarot cards, or oracle cards, because she had to check on her friend's dog or something. Like,
So she had the physical cards to show you and things
yes.
like that.
And then there was a metaphysical being that was staying in the house.
Yeah, that was taking your experiences and expanding on them.
Yes. Yeah.
Ooh, how do you, what was that like realizing that, like you said 2 years ago?
2 years
You
ago.
realized
Or maybe
that,
even last year.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it was last year.
What was that like for you realizing that, oh, we have different memories for a reason?
Um, it's been really strange, and it's
Yeah.
been really hard to unpack.
Mm.
Like I'm still kind of going through the process of unpacking it, but actually just telling people the story is really helping that experience. It's
Mm-hmm.
making me feel a little less crazy, especially since the people that I do tell tend to be in the spiritual
Mm-hmm.
realm. And I've heard other stories about different experiences of people coming to that near death experience and then
Mm-hmm.
being having people come into their lives to like assist them afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that helps a lot to make me feel a little more grounded in this situation, because sometimes I'm like, whoa, like if this was 1950, I'd be in a psych ward, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of a thing. And so it's trying to break societal normality ideas, because most spiritual practitioners, you don't really hear a lot of that kind of like story where you feel so strongly that your guide is real that they come to you in physical form.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, most of the guides I speak with now are actually just light, like are just balls of light. They're
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
actual beings.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's weird,
Yeah.
but it's getting easier, and I'm accepting it more as,
As it's not just this thing you're carrying alone.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah.
people are saying, no, you're not crazy. Hopefully. I hope other
The
people are saying that.
majority of people have the same reaction that you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And I think that really goes to knowing who you're talking to
Mm-hmm.
and making sure you're talking to the right people about things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because some people will have a very weird reaction
Mm-hmm.
to that.
Mm-hmm. It can be very scary
Yes.
experiences like this. And it sounds like your experience wasn't scary because it was so rooted in the real,
The,
the,
the
the
belief
3D
that this
real.
person was a real person
Yeah.
living in our
Yeah.
house.
And it made sense in your mind. It makes sense to me that however all this happened in real time, your brain made sense of it in a way that worked with your understanding at the time. This friend that you actually knew who could have moved in with you was going to move in with you at one point,
Yes.
like um but I'm just imagining how startling that can be to have that realization so many years later. Obviously, like, this is a great time in your life to have that realization when you've done so much personal growth and healing and work, and you have so much understanding about spirituality, and like, this probably, it doesn't fall very far outside of your kind of range of like what's reasonable to happen in your life, I guess.
It doesn't fall too far out of the range of reasonable, but sometimes you think even people on the path, because of what things are supposed to look like,
Mm-hmm.
and the expectations, what you see, like sometimes it reaches far beyond what your expectation
Mm-hmm.
of that would be. Does that make sense at all?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. To look back and see that you had a real time interaction with a guide. In your experience, it was a physical interaction, metaphysical turned physical, right?
yeah.
To look back and see that from my perspective, for me, that would exceed what I would expect. For sure, of like what would happen, right? Even now,
Yeah.
when I'm like, okay, I'm learning how to connect with my guides, things like that. It's very in my, you know, mind space. It's very in my consciousness space and imagination space. Like, I'm nuts. I don't have the experience of seeing my guide sitting in front of me as I know some people do, or having like, hearing their voices, things like that. For me, it's a very peaceful, calm, chill little experience. So that would far exceed my expectations.
Yes.
I believe it's possible. And yet, if it happened, I'd be pretty wigged out.
Right? Yeah, because it's just not well, and then you have this overall feeling like, well, why did they choose me? Like,
Yeah.
like that would happen to somebody else because they have those gifts where that's not
Mm.
something that I tend to have.
Mm.
But it all comes back around for me that I was just in such a low, desperate mode of where I was in my life,
Mm-hmm.
that whoever was watching me at that time was like, give this person, oh, they need help. Like,
Yeah.
you've got things to do. You can't exit now.
Mm.
So let's get them going. And I mean, it didn't make it it didn't make the connection between me being at church any easier. If
Mm.
anything, it made it more difficult. But I definitely had more tools
Mm-hmm.
to help assist in my own personal growth by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't really offer any teachers either. It was just like everything I was doing, I was learning from who I thought was a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
who was a
Mm-hmm.
teacher, but not in the physical realm.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. So it sounds like it helped lift you up out of that space a bit.
A bit. I definitely still had a lot of issues
Yeah.
um, in that, that war between me and my mother and what I thought I deserved to have my life to be
Mm.
versus what she thought I deserved to have my life to be.
Mm.
Um, because so forward projection, I've been not going, I stopped going to church, stopped doing anything church related.
Mhm.
And my mom shipped me to live to here to Idaho to live
Mm.
with my sister and her 4 kids and her husband. And that was a very dark period as
Mm.
well. And I kind of stepped away from a lot of stuff, but like, because I was just so angry about
Mhm.
everything. And I was forced to go back to church, and I was, told that the Constitution didn't apply to me till I turned 18.
Oh.
And like, so that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. But I never stopped talking about it.
Mm.
And in fact, I had some of the girls that went to church with me, I actually ended up getting them out of the church.
Mm.
And I would talk to them about this spiritual stuff and the meditation that one of them actually pushed me into getting my first oracle deck when she found Crone's cupboard.
Mm. So by mhm. Like by just doing what you kind of had to do in that situation, going to the church that you weren't feeling comfortable going to, but still being yourself, being as Michelle as you
For as
could be.
angry as I was.
Yeah, I'm guessing like for whatever, however that worked at the time, you were still speaking and sharing, and therefore you collected a little coven.
I did just a
Just
little
a
one.
little wee coven.
It was just 3 of us.
Yeah.
But three's like it's 3 or 13 in my mind. Those are the two numbers you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to speak, more like you found some shared interest and support and excitement for expanding your understanding of what was possible. It sounds like that's what you were craving, it sounds like,
Yes.
to move out of the rules and regulations of that church and into like there's a whole world. There's a whole
So much more.
world.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an interesting experience. And I don't remember all the things that I would do and all the things that went on because, I got angry.
Yeah.
I thought I deserved a shitty life because I couldn't
Mm.
follow the rules and I didn't want to comply with the rules. So there was this mix of like feeling like I deserved a shitty life for not following the rules and this rebellious version of myself that said, well, I'm going to do the absolute opposite I can to prove to you that I'm not going to do what you want me to do.
Mm.
And so that's when I ended up getting married. We were talking about that
Mm.
earlier.
Yeah.
Um,
How old were you when you got married?
so I was 22 when I got married, but I had been with him since I was 18.
Okay.
And he was very much against the spiritual stuff. I had a group of friends that were very spiritual, like
Mm-hmm.
that saw ghosts and heard ghosts, and like we would do random ghost finding things, like out in Cuna caves.
Oh gosh. Oh.
Back in the day.
Oh, God.
And I've had some crazy experiences down there.
It's a very unique space.
Yes. Done some weird things down there. Teenagers, man.
Yeah.
When there's nothing else to do and you live in rural
Climb
Idaho.
down a hole
in the ground.
in the ground.
That's completely pitch black
It
in the
is
middle
so
of the
dangerous.
night. We used to get these tea lights and we'd put these back in the day. When we could go to Walmart and you get a bag of like 100 tea lights for like $5,
Mm-hmm.
like either $1 or $5. I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember. And so then we would take this entire bag of tea lights and just like completely light up down below. And so
Sounds kind of cool.
oh, it was like, for me, it felt like the witchiest thing we could be doing because, like, here we're underground.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point we were all very obsessed with vampires. Like,
Totally.
So you're feeling very gothic. I was always a very gothic kid,
Yeah.
and so like here I am underground and walking around by tea light candles
With friends who can see ghosts.
with friends who can see ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sounds like quite a rich experience.
Yeah, and that was before I got married.
Mm-hmm. Was your husband from a similar background as you?
No, he was legitimately the redheaded stepchild. Got in trouble a lot. Lived on the streets for a little while when he was a
Mm,
teenager because his mom kicked him out.
mm,
And he came from a background where his mom didn't always have his best interest in heart, and she
um,
didn't necessarily have her own best interests at heart. And so he grew up very much poor
mm,
and kind of exiled, which in a way I felt I was
mhm,
too, even though his was more different areas.
mhm, mhm.
I've never put two and two together before this
Hmm.
moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's interesting how some time and space and processing can just make things a little clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So got married at 22.
Got married at 22. He thought my deja vus and like all those times where I would like be able to finish people's conversations, because
Mm,
he's like, no, he scientifically would break it down and be like, no, this is the science behind why that's happening. This is not a memory. And I was like, but I can remember the difference between
mm,
what I saw before and how it's happening now,
mm.
because
Interesting.
they were starting to happen so often that like I was like, this is kind of boring. Like, how can I spice it up? Okay, let's see what's different.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, to like kind of prove to myself that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't making this stuff up.
So these deja vus were you having almost like premonitions and then having the experience? Or were you in the experience having a memory of the experience? How did that work?
So it felt like I was having a memory of a dream
Hmm.
but experiencing it in real life. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like almost like this lens would
Mm,
cover,
mm-hmm.
like where it looks like you've got two photos sitting on top of each other,
Hmm.
and either things all lined up or things didn't quite line up. And I always felt like the more deja vu I had, the more I was on the right path or in the right
Hmm.
spot. Because if I had had a dream, because I feel like mine are like more of a dream that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I dreamed it before and now I'm here, then
Hmm.
this is the direction that I'm supposed to be on.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So you were trying to share these very unique experiences that are hard to describe, hard to put words to, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the moment, you're trying to share this with your husband, and he's basically like, "Here's the science of why that's happening," and
Not happening.
it's not happening. Well, I mean, isn't it Tesla who says like spirituality and science will one day meet?
So they do constantly.
They do. Oh, they do all the time, right? Like
Yeah. I
it's
actually
happening.
I love scientists because scientists prove all the witches were right.
Yes, there's so many studies now about like yeah, mind reading and the way that like
The world was flat once,
yeah,
now it's round. Like,
yeah,
you know,
it's just
we knew that
crazy,
before,
right?
but then science, for everybody else who decided not to be connected with the earth anymore, because really that's really all a
Mm-hmm.
witch is someone who's
Connected
connected
to
to the
the
earth.
earth. And isn't the
And
etymology of the word witch like wise person
I think
in like
so. Well,
some Germanic? Mm.
the word hag is it was something that ended up being demonized
Mm.
by the church to mean an ugly old woman, but a hag was actually the wise elder woman.
Mm.
So, like,
Hmm.
have you ever heard of a hag stone?
I have.
Yeah, so you find this stone that's got a hole through the middle of it, and
Oh, okay.
and you put it through, and you
Yeah.
can see to other areas. But those
Interesting.
are hag stone, and
Okay.
so the word hag actually used to be a celebration
Mm-hmm.
of the wonderful wisdom that a elder woman would hold.
So hag changed to a derogatory term, which went from wise person connected with the earth and the traditions of the time to
Evil.
evil, yeah,
Yeah.
demon, whatnot, devil worshippers, like all this kind of stuff. When the church felt that that was a threat to them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's so many different countries that had their own eras of witch hunters.
Mm. And some still do.
And some, I mean, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them still do, but a lot
Yeah.
of them, um, I mean, that's who St. Patrick was in Ireland.
Yes, I didn't learn that till recently.
Yeah, so the snakes. So it's interesting because they talk about
Mm.
how St. Patrick it got rid of all the snakes in Ireland, but there
Right.
never were any snakes in Ireland. So a snake is a symbol for wisdom.
Mm.
And so when they say that St. Patrick drove all the snakes out of Ireland, he drove the wisdom and the connection out of Ireland,
Which would be
which would be the
anyone
witch, anyone.
anyone holding to the indigenous traditions or the traditions that kept them connected with the earth,
Yeah.
seasons, the rhythms. Very interesting.
Right?
So to bring it back to you again.
Oh yeah. Sorry. We just
no, it's perfect. It's perfect weaving. You were having experiences that this is me analyzing.
Yeah.
You were having experiences that threatened your husband at the time. Well, boyfriend and then husband. I'm sure you were having all sorts of experiences with him throughout your relationship, but we're having these experiences that threatened his way of viewing things, right? I'm imagining. Hence why that was a shutdown.
I think that it was just, I don't think it threatened how he looked at it because he was so okay with his own beliefs that he would just shut it down so that I would be put back into my place.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because he was
feeling like it could be true or something.
Yeah, or like, that
it's more like no, just complete dismissal.
Yeah, just no. That's not how the world works. Yeah. But luckily, we ended that.
Yes.
For the best, for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah.
And it was actually so to continue on my like spiritual path and growth. So when I had ended that marriage or was starting to go through the process of ending that marriage, my friend who told me to get the oracle cards had actually started attending sweat lodges.
Interesting.
Her therapist had told her about sweat lodges, and so she was like, well, come with me to this sweat lodge. Let's go release some of this stuff. And so I did. And it was a very beautiful experience. There were 22 women at a lodge in the middle of the winter. There was snow on the ground. And it's really interesting because the person who taught me Reiki was the one who was holding this lodge. And she talks about it. This is the only time she ever had 22 people in the lodge, and I was one of those people in that lodge. So like we had to learn how to weave into each other, and it was just such a beautiful experience of release and filling and being supported by the earth, but also being supported by a bunch of women and by a bunch of people who also believed in the same thing that you were. Even if it was their first time there, it was like they didn't just randomly appear. They went there searching for healing. And so it was really nice to be held in that bowl.
Yeah. I'm imagining, particularly after maybe feeling so unheard or unseen in that marriage.
Yes.
Like suddenly be around particularly other women who wouldn't have batted an eye, probably hearing about your deja vu or, memory dreams or things like that.
And they didn't. I continued to do those lodges for a long time. Yeah. And then I remember one day I came to I had become a preschool teacher sub,
Mm.
so I got to make my own schedule. And so there was a lodge once a month on the first Tuesday of the month. And so, like, I had created my schedule so that, like, I would always be available.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went the first time and I said, it's been so long since I've been here. Now I can be back because I've made it my schedule so I
Mm.
can. And the lodge keep at the time was actually stepping down, and someone was had who had been training with her for 10 years was taking her spot. And they said, oh, so you're going to be firekeeper now? And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? You've made this commitment to come,
Okay.
and next month, like, we need somebody to be in training for the firekeeper.
So I'm gonna. I've never been to a sweat lodge.
Okay.
I've had curiosity and I've heard really beautiful things.
It's a beautiful experience.
Yeah. Um. So it sounds like when you like said like I'm committing to coming back, they want you to take on this role. Firekeeper, I'm gonna assume is literally like keeping the fire going and stoking it. I'm assuming there's some sort of training in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because imagine temperature as much as you want it to get. Very, very
No.
hot. Ooh.
No. Okay, so a firekeeper creates the fire. Well, it depends on
Uh-huh.
what country you're in and how you want to do it, because there is a very indigenous, um, it is very indigenous and very indigenous to a lot of different cultures. So, like, Ireland has sweat lodges. A lot of Northern Europe has sweat lodges, like South America,
Interesting. I didn't know that.
America. Yeah,
This is
it's really
fun.
cool because I know
Yeah.
people get really like, oh, you're what's that one term?
What you're talking about.
But that term where we're white and we're taking it over.
The word is on my mouth.
Yeah,
Oh
whatever
my
that
God.
word is.
It's like whatever.
Cultural appropriation.
Appropriation. I was like, it starts with an A. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so the type of lodge that I went to was not a native indigenous lodge. We did not practice indigenous traditions because we were not trained in it, and we are not indigenous
And there was no
native,
one leading that.
and there was
To
no
be
one
that way,
leading it.
yeah.
And so where my teacher got their training is very specific spiritual training of lodges. And so what the way that our lodge works was is that you created the fire outside the lodge, and a lot of fires will do the fire is created outside the lodge, and you heat the stones in the fire, and then the firekeeper takes those stones and brings them inside, and the lodge keep is the one who is aware of who is, like, how hot the temperature is. You're not going for a specific temperature, you'll never know how much it is. It's all very much an energy transfer and holding and knowing how everyone in that lodge is feeling, and making sure that everyone in that lodge is okay, is part of a lodge keeper's and that comes from years of training of, like, knowing how to do that.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so I was on that path of becoming a lodge keep. I just took a step back because recently, because things shifted. Yeah. Yeah.
So the first time you ever did a sweat lodge was when you were preparing to divorce.
Yes.
Which was how long ago?
Over 10 years ago.
Over 10 years ago. And so sounds like a really pivotal point that then you've carried on that tradition for quite some time.
Yes. It was definitely a reawakening, coming back into myself, started playing with oracle cards more. But what hadn't really dedicated, I mean, I dedicated myself to a spiritual path so that I could be a fire keeper. But I hadn't necessarily taken that full step, like, into this being where I am. I mean, I was going to festivals, Burning Man. I was in the Burning Man community for a while. But I wasn't really living on, like, the same kind of spiritual path that I'm living now, where I'm really, and by that, really in tuned with who I am my feelings and what my feelings are and how my body
Mhm.
works and all that. Like to
Mhm.
me, that's the spiritual path. Is it's
Yeah.
not like it's not the lighting the sage. It's not the
Mhm.
doing all that. It's really being in tune with your body and how your body is in tune with nature around you.
Mm. Mhm. I like that definition or that experience of your spiritual path.
Yeah.
How like connected and it does like you said you don't personally ascribe to Wiccanism, but that witch heritage, that wise person connected with the earth. It sounds
Yeah.
like that really calls to you and really resonates with you.
Absolutely. I was on the path for a little while to be considered an earth shaman
Mm.
and was doing those trainings.
What is an earth
So is exactly what you just said. The
shaman?
someone who's connected with the elements of the
Awesome.
earth and who uses that to do
Very
healings.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving forward in my journey, because my journey
Yeah.
doesn't stop
I
there.
was gonna say I feel like there's more.
There is quite a bit
Okay.
more, and it actually